I was realizing that I'd given you kind of a tough time the last couple of weeks, the last couple of times I was here. In case you don't know it, I happen to love data and information and tracking down little bits of things. In case you weren't aware of that. And I wanted to give you the material that I would be referring back to for a while. And I think I may have overwhelmed you. Sorry about that. Today we are going to be talking about something we alluded to several times in the last couple of times I was here. And we're going to be talking about the fairy world. What are fairies? What is this about? How does this relate to our world today? What is going on here? And one of the things that I talked about last time was that when Caesar encountered the people, the man who became Julius Caesar, encountered the people that we call the Celtic people, the people of the area of northern France and so on, the Britain and Wales and Scotland, he encountered a priestly caste, the Druids, and we talked about that. And as the Celts discovered what the Roman Empire was about, they began a program of protecting themselves. So there were a group of people who interacted with the Romans and the Empire, and there were others who were secreted away into the woods, into the streams, into the wilds of the moors, into the swamp areas, who were protected from having to interact with these urbanized, intellectual, left-brained beings who had no idea about the true nature of life everywhere, of love everywhere, of power emanating from the earth. And these people came to be known as the Fae. Now, it's an interesting word because Fae comes from the Latin through the French, meaning faith. Faith. These are people who have a faith in the nature of things, in the nature of life, in the nature of love, in the power of the sun, in the power of God's presence everywhere, in and through all. Where the urbanized empire people did not have such faith. They had no concept that anything other than what brain can consider and hands can create would accomplish anything. So the Fae were small, dark people who were hiding in the forests and the glens, in the deep canyons, in the swamplands, while the empire, in its various forms, took over more and more of the pasture lands and the open forests, the more open areas, and formed cities and created farms, tilled the land to feed the people in the cities. This is not how the Fae live. The Fae live knowing that the earth supplies everything because we are in harmony and pure balance with her. That the sun gives us all the warmth and the light that we need, and that we can use the stored warmth of the earth to maintain our well-being, and that we can design our homes so that the sun's light during the day lights our home. We don't need any other creations of man to be happy. So the Fae began to become more and more mysterious to the urbanized writers and readers and the speakers of what was true. They got less and less connected with these people of the earth, these people of the sun, the people of the light. And so as the Roman Empire began to fall away, it began to be replaced by a new structure that we call the Roman Church. And the Roman Church held together the bits and pieces of the empire, and it focused everyone's attention on this incredible being that we call Jesus, the Christ, an amazing being who somehow managed to live in an empire culture and still know that the power is available to every single one of us if we allow ourselves to be in that balance. Wow. He even overcame death in that knowing, in that union with the divine. To the Fae, that was nothing new. But to the urbanized, left-brain, materialistic empire citizen, that was very strange indeed. And we see that in the world today, don't we? So, what began to happen between about 500 AD and about 1600 AD was that those mysterious creatures of the woods and the forest and the glens and the streams and the caves and the swamps began to be magicalized in people's thinking. And along about 1500, actually 1567, a remarkable Brit called Spencer, Mr. Spencer, who I was introduced to because our Filipino guerrilla veteran roommate was doing her doctorate in Spencer at the University of Chicago. How weird is this? Anyway, that's how I met Spencer, and she was studying his major work, The Faerie Queen, which is absolutely filled with falsities and untruths and misstatements. But it woke up all kinds of possibilities in people's minds. Because what he did is he took some work that had been written about 400 years before that by Chrétien de Troyes. Chrétien means Christian, and de Troyes, of the three, of the Trinity. But there was a town in France, de Troyes, and so everyone thought he was Chrétien, a man from Troy. That's Troy, Troyes in French. Anyway, so he'd written this story that was an allegory that was explaining what the Templars were about. And he called it the story of King Arthur. And in the story, he said Arthur was a son of an emperor, of a Roman governor actually, the representative of the emperor, and of a woman who was a Celtic woman whose parents were also, one of her parents was Le Fae, was a fairy person. And so when Arthur came into his power as a young man, remember the sword and the stone, right? When Arthur came into his power as a young man, he was brought into his power in part by the then queen of the fairies, Morgan Le Fay, who happened to be his first cousin in the Hieros Gamos, the sacred union. And this is the story that Chrétien de Troyes was sharing with the whole world in his writing about how we could understand the importance of true knighthood. And what he was really doing was saying that the power of Britain lies in the union of understanding what Christianity is about and understanding what the earth spirit's life is about. Does that make sense? Yeah. So part of why we love Arthur and that whole story so much is it is that balance. It's the union of the two, the things that have been separated in our world and our lives so long. So how many of you used to love to watch Tinkerbell come on Walt Disney World, yeah? Wasn't that the best part? Yeah. Where did she come from? Really, where did that being come from? Because there's no relationship between Morgan Le Fay and Tinkerbell. Wow. And yet Tinkerbell is this embodiment of light and love and this incredible being that, brings wisdom in her funny little way, impish little way to all these interactions that these kids are having and sometimes the adults are having, right? Yes. Oh, my goodness. So I grew up with Tinkerbell, as many of us did, and did not know any of what I just told you. how many of us did? Right? So, to me, that was what fairies were about. And there was a power in there that somehow was pointing to a power we all had access to, yeah? Somehow. And the same thing with Jesus' story. He said, these things and greater shall you do. So there's a power there that I'm being offered, and I don't have access to it. So I've spent my whole life on that journey. That's been what my journey has been. Yeah, I woke up at 7. I remember at 7 I was talking with my grandmother, and I was going, really? The Bible says that? Well, how come we're not all doing these things? Right? Well, that led to several degrees, as many of you know. Because that's what I was told was where you go for knowledge, right? You go to the college, the university. That's where the knowledge is. And I really built up that left brain. And then the body gave out. Raising kids and working and going to school all at the same time. The body just didn't want to handle that too well. And I was required to explore the other side of my mind. That right brain, that holistic, that relational brain, that mind that knows that it is all one and we are part of it. We cannot be separated from the oneness that is. We cannot be separated from the creation and the creative process. There's a guy named Thomas Troward, and he calls God the creative process. Isn't that a nice way to think about it? Yes. We can't be separated from that because that whole process is in us, through us, and as us. Oh, my goodness. Well, the body got well as I began to accept that and allow that and experience that, but I still didn't understand where Tinkerbell came from. Long about 1978, Barnes & Noble put out a book, which is a copy of something that was printed in 1878. Thomas Cately, The World Guide to Gnomes, Fairies, and Elves. All right, so the left brain's going, oh, the answer's got to be in here. This is a good book. It's a big one. There's got to be an answer in there somewhere. So I wandered through it, and he actually recognized that there was this point in Spencer where there was this conflation of the Fae, the people who were the original residents of what we call Britain, Scotland, and Wales, and northern France, and these other ideas, and Ireland, thank you, these other ideas. And these other ideas come from India. They are the Devas. And in Persia, they are the Faerie. And guess what? Arabic does not have a P in the written language. So what is pronounced in English, P-E-R-I, Faerie, is written Faerie. So the Fae become fairies, the mysterious beings of light and love that inhabit the trees and the streams and the rocks and the caves and the meadows, and that most love the natural processes because they know how to connect the two. So on page 31, really that is the most important page in this whole book. All right. He talks about Merlin, and he talks about Vivian, and he talks about all of these people. And he says that there is a learning that happens. In consequence of the knowledge thus acquired, she became a fairy. For the author informs us that the damsel who carried Lancelot to the lake was a fae. And in those times, all those women were called fays who had to do with enchantments and charms. And there were many of them then, principally in what is now Great Britain. And they knew the power and the virtues of woods and stones of words and herbs by which they were kept in youth and in beauty and in great riches as they devised. Isn't that interesting? The women's circle should be very powerful. All right, so that's all very cool and nice and wonderful, and my intellect was satisfied, but it didn't satisfy my heart. I wanted to know Tinkerbell. I wanted to feel the presence of these wonderful beings. I wanted to experience them, and I know there are people in this room who have experienced them, and it is a marvelous thing. The Devas. My next introduction to the Devas was Findhorn. Yes? Yes, anyone who read The Findhorn Garden? And are you aware that the guy who wrote the book The Findhorn Garden is the guy who is Smith and Hawkins Garden Supplies? Paul Hawken. And wrote The Next Economy and wrote Growing a Business. Does that help? Yes, amazing man. So anyway, he went and he learned about how it was that Findhorn was established, and Peter and Eileen Caddy and their beautiful, beautiful friend Margaret, who woke up in the middle of the night and she kept hearing these voices, and they were living in a trailer park. No one around here knows what that's like. And but in that particular trailer park, the only private place was the bathrooms, the shared bathrooms. So she'd get up in the middle of the night where there was a light and go to the bathrooms, sit on one of the closed stools and start writing. And write whatever she heard. And what she heard was, this is how to grow your garden. We are the spirits of the garden. We want to help you. And so she started learning, well, you want to do this, and then you do this. And, of course, their garden was pure sand. No one around here knows about that either. Their garden was pure sand, and there was nothing there. And so the fairies, the elves, the devas, and they accepted themselves as devas. They didn't say they were fairies and elves. They said they were devas. We are the spirits of these plants. Do these things, and we will help you. Feed us, care for us, and we will help grow these plants. So cauliflowers in that first few years were this big, coming out of the sand garden in this trailer court at Findhorn. Well, that attracted attention. And then other fae people, if you will, other devas, other Faeries, other, quote, mythical beings started showing up in different ways and providing all kinds of other wisdom. And what did it take to have access to that? Very interesting. It took loving what is, entering the silence, and allowing the inner vision to see what the eyes could not see, letting the imagination run away with you. That's what it took. Does this sound familiar? In some places, this is how we describe prayer. Loving what is, entering the silence, and allowing the inner vision to see what the eyes cannot see. My goodness. So what we're talking about are light beings who do not feel separated from the divine. They have different names in different cultures. This book describes all the different names in all the different cultures and all the different stories in which they show up. It's well worn because both I and my children have spent lots of hours in this book. Have you noticed lately that you have a sense that there's more in life than just the material? Yeah? About the turn of this century, people started saying, the veil's getting thinner. The veil's getting thinner. We can sense people on the other side. People have passed over. There are more near-death experiences. There are more mediums in the world now, more psychics who are able to access that. And there are many more people inviting you to come into the woods with them and meet the fairies. and meet the elves. Meet the light beings who realize there is no separation between what appears to be matter form and the light and the love we call God. Wow. Well, one of those men is a man named Brian Froude, or Froude, depending on who's reading it. And he wrote something, he made a series of books about the fairies, and those got so exciting and so much attention that he created a deck of cards of fairies. So I'm going to turn on this other mic now. Can you hear me? Yay, I love this. Will it work if I go in front of the speakers? Woohoo! Freedom! I love it. All right. You get to pick cards. You don't get to keep them, though. I have to take them home. They belong to the Portal Center. Now, I warn you, these are not Tinkerbells. They have some very alien appearances, which makes Tress's song very interesting. She chose, and the reading, out of the stars, right? Out of the stars that we came from, the reading that we read, we are not separated from the other beings of the world. So these are interdimensional beings. These are beings that are outside of our normal space and time. They are beings that know there is no separation, so they are not stuck in our space-time continuum. Space and time and matter come from the belief that separation from divinity is possible. Did you hear that? Space and time and matter come from the belief that separation out of oneness is possible. So as you pick these cards, find what you love and what you don't like about them. It will be difficult to read because the script is very strange. But you can read it if you allow your eyes to simply relax into them. Thank you, dear. All right. So, as I say, these are interdimensional beings, and they have a kind of a wisdom. I'm coming behind you here. They have a kind of a wisdom and insight that is perfect for you in this moment. That's the back side, and that's the front side. There you go. Now, one of the interesting things about oracles of any kind is that they have an image, they have words, and they have numbers. I missed you guys. Rose, would you take one, please? Thank you. And Vim, thank you. I'll get you. I'm coming around. Yes, I'm coming. So they have words and images and numbers, and all of them are meaningful. I'll come from that side over there. Okay. Thank you. All of them are meaningful. So the word, if you're familiar with Chaldean numerology, the numbers, you take the 2 digits of the numbers and you add them together to get something less than 11. And each of those numbers then has a power and a meaning in themselves. So the number 1, if you add them up and you get the number 1, it's about beginnings and creativity and power of innovation and leadership. If you add them together and you get a number 2, it's about complementarity and relationship and dialogue. If you add them together and you get a number 3, it's the Trinity. It's balance in potential. Did everyone get a card? Cool. Missed one. I thought I missed you. Yahoo! I want one of these. How nice. You're welcome. If you add them together and get a 4, you're in a transitional stage, which is a balanced one, but it's still about to change, yeah? If you add them together and you get a 5, it's in one of those aha moments. You're an aha moment. Things have come together and I understand, and it feels like everything's happening just right. And if you're adding them together and you get a 6, you're in a transition, like going over a traveling kind of transition. You're moving from one generation, in one space to another, one way of being to another. If you add them together and you get a 7, you're in a mystical state. Mystical state. If you add them together and you get an 8 is one of those, again, a balance. They're kind of in a balance, right? And there's a potential in there that's just about to complete itself. There's something about to complete itself. Add it together and get the 9, you come to the end of a process. Okay? So that's the number on your card. The words on your card obviously have meaning. Did everyone get to read? Could you decipher this thing? Yeah? Could you decipher it? Yeah?
What if we have like a 6 or one number?
If you have 6, it's fine. 6 is a 6. 6 is a transition from one state of being to another. That's wonderful. 11 is a double 1. All right? Yeah. 12, add them together. 1 and 2 makes 3. So you're in the Trinity. You're in that balanced, stable. You're going to be sitting there for a while. 10 is a 1. 10 is a 1. All right? Blank. Oh, infinite possibilities. Yeah.
50. That's funny for me.
1 and 5 adds up to
30 years. And this says journeyman.
You got the journeyman. I love it. Oracles are marvelous, aren't they? All right. So, yes.
She of the cruise.
What's the number?
5.
Okay. She of the
Cruach.
The receptive principle of nurturing femininity. Woo! That's actually, in the tarot, that would be a major arcana. Yeah.
Laume.
What's the number?
30.
Number 30. Oh, I pulled that one once. Okay, so it's Laume, or Lome, and it's unconditional giving, unconditional receiving. That's Helen. All right. So afterwards, especially during the dialogue circle, you can go through and read the different meanings of them. But your job here is to first see what is most appealing to you of the image and what is most uncomfortable to you of the image. Because that's where the image has its role. Okay? The fairy world is a world of interconnectedness, oneness, recognizing that everything is reflecting what you are right now. Right now. So this is a reflection of either who you believe yourself to be or what your actual sense of self is, one or the other, right now. So that which you appreciate is that which you appreciate in yourself and in your world, and that which you are uncomfortable with is that which you are uncomfortable with in yourself and your world. Now, it's a really marvelous process to think about all of the ways that the world can reflect to us what we are ready to experience. But I think it's even more wonderful to realize the way in which we have the power to bring forth in the world that which we are ready to experience. Don't you? That's the other lesson that the fairies give us. Now, I have a theory about all of these beings. Gnomes, fairies, elves, brownies, sprites, whatever you call them, whatever language, they are all interdimensional beings. small grays, big grays, reptilians, Arcturians, Pleiadians, they're all interdimensional beings for me. It's the different cultures at different times call them different things. They are light beings taking the form we are ready to experience now. We're a high-tech, space-age culture. We turn them into ETs. Right? In a low-tech, earth-centered culture, we turn them into devas, plant spirits, right? And animal spirits and stream spirits. In an empire culture that doesn't like to acknowledge this really exists, they're those mystical beings off in the forest, right? Something to be aware of, right? So, did anyone get the fairy godmother? Aha! You got the mother. You got the bright mother. I'm not surprised. You got the fairy godmother. Welcome. The fairy godmother, as we all know, if we watched anything done by Walt Disney, we all know that the fairy godmother is always present to provide our every dearest wish. Thank you, dear. Right? And she is the reflection of the power in us. These things and greater shall you do. She is always present with us because she is us. But we put her out here because we don't want to acknowledge it in here. There's that quote that people, put back and forth. It's either Nelson Mandela or Marianne Williamson. The thing we're afraid of is not how weak we are, but how strong we are, what our power really is. And the way I heard it is Nelson quoted Marianne. But right. Okay, what we have been afraid of is that we actually are and have that power that we have always held out there. Right? But all the great spiritual teachers have said, it isn't out there. It's here. Jesus, it's here. The kingdom of heaven is here. It's within us. Krishna, focus on me in here. In here. Go within to find the power and the wisdom. So, the fairies, they look very alien, because we have separated ourselves from these capabilities. Thank you, Vim, for taking it on. He's always been a journeyman. He gets the journeyman, yeah? We've separated ourselves from him, but they are not out there. If you want to find the fairies, go within. If you want to find the Christ, go within. You want to find the Buddha, go within. You want to find peace, love, joy, power? Go within. The fairy kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, enlightenment, it's not out there. It's here. Thank you all very much.